while forcefully pulling away the small hand her son extended towards her. The sound resonated loudly in the quiet living room. It's New Year's Day. I don't see why I need to give New Year's money to someone else's child, Nancy said with a contemptuous expression. Nancy looked at us as if we were something dirty. Beside me, my son's small shoulders trembled instinctively. I reached out and gently stroked his little hand. I never wanted him to experience this kind of pain. But at this moment, I lacked the power to protect him or change our circumstances. Oh, you're such a cute little one. This year I put something extra special in your envelopes, she said, addressing my sister-in-law's children with sickeningly sweet words. Her words felt like shards of ice cutting through the air while my son and I sat unnoticed. As if we didn't exist. Every year on this day, I suffer the same treatment. But this year it hurt more than ever. Just yesterday, Mick, my son, had been talking excitedly about visiting Grandma's house. His eyes lit up every time he mentioned it. He was eager to receive his New Year's gift and create a special memory to start the year. That pure and innocent expectation was now shattering before my eyes, crumbling like a fragile house of cards. Seeing this unfold made me feel like my heart was being torn apart. I sat in silence, gripping the edge of the rug so tightly that my nails dug into its surface. The physical pain was easier to bear than the emotional distress. Grandma, his little voice broke the silence. Big tears began to fall. Seeing him like that made my heart feel like it was tearing into pieces. The next moment, I felt him tightly clutching my sleeve. His small hand was trembling, and his shaky hand brought tears to my eyes, but I fought to keep them from falling. I didn't want to cry here. Not in front of my son. I wanted to be a strong mother for him. I couldn't take it anymore. Gently caressing my son's head, I stood up. Let's go home, I said in a calm voice that sounded even to myself. Oh, are you leaving already? Nancy asked as they began to serve the family dinner. At that moment, my phone rang. Seeing the name on the screen, something inside me stirred. All the emotions I had been suppressing threatened to spill out immediately. I am Jessica Hunter. I am originally from a small town, but I moved to the city for work. At first, life in the big city was overwhelming, but over time I got used to its comforts. Now, when I go back to my hometown, I feel like something is missing. Today, I am a stay-at-home mom and take care of my 6-year-old son, Mick. But I wasn't always a stay-at-home mom. I used to be a career woman working for a major commercial company. Back then, I earned a salary of about 90,000 pesos a year. Enough to buy everything I wanted and live comfortably. Sometimes, I think about those carefree days and wonder if I made the right decision. But then I remember that if I had continued working, perhaps I would never have met my son. Now, I cannot imagine a life without him. My parents were teachers and greatly valued education. They sent me to a private high school, which ultimately helped me get into a prestigious university and land a job at a major commercial company. I am deeply grateful to them for giving me such opportunities. That is why I felt so guilty when I decided to quit my job at the company. I questioned my decision over and over, wondering if I was making a mistake. I didn't even tell many people the real reason I was leaving, so my colleagues were surprised and tried to dissuade me. Every time they did, I felt like they were tearing a piece from my heart. It has been 6 years since I left that job. Although I sometimes miss it, I am grateful for the time I have been able to spend with Mick. Being able to be with him during these precious early years has been invaluable. I quit my job because I became pregnant at 31. I was excited to be expecting my first child. Everything was going well until one day, a doctor told me that I was at risk of premature labor, and continuing to work could have put me and my baby in danger. So, I made the heartbreaking decision to resign. My husband, John, was very supportive and told me that he would take care of me. His words gave me the courage to finally make the decision. Without his support, perhaps I would have continued working and put myself and my son at risk. Now, I work part-time in an office 3 days a week. My monthly income is only 1,200 pesos, which seems like a drop in the ocean compared to my previous salary, but it helps to maintain our home. So I try to be content with that. My husband's salary is not very high, so raising a child solely on his income can be a bit difficult. I don't want to hurt his pride by mentioning this, So I just say that I work part-time to stay connected to society. John and I have known each other since childhood. We went to the same elementary school. But we lost touch when I started attending a private high school. We reconnected at our class reunion. At first, I didn't recognize him because his appearance had changed a lot. But his kind personality was still the same and brought back memories of our childhood. To be honest, he wasn't my type physically, but his unwavering devotion eventually moved me, and we started dating. His kindness continued throughout our relationship, and even our friends were envious of how considerate he was. However, things changed after we got married. He became distant and stopped getting involved in mixed upbringing. When I told him I was pregnant, he cried with joy. But now he barely participates. Lately, John's behavior has been strange. Before, he barely touched his phone. But now he carries it with him everywhere, even to the bathroom. He says he has been working overtime due to his busy schedule. But he comes home later than ever. A woman's intuition is rarely wrong. And I can't shake the feeling that he is having an affair. And he is not very good at keeping secrets. So if he is cheating on me, I am sure that evidence will soon come to light. Until then, I have decided not to confront him or snoop around. Because if he realizes that I suspect him, he might start hiding evidence. If John is really having an affair, I suspect that it could be due to the emotional scars of his childhood. He grew up in a single-parent home and always felt the need to meet his mother's expectations. He once told me that he worked hard to please her because he didn't want to cause her any problems. He accepted numerous well-paid job interviews hoping to provide her with financial support. But after many rejections, he settled for his current position. I remember how surprised he was when we discussed our salaries before marriage. My income was significantly higher, which must have been a blow to his pride. Because we avoided talking about our salaries altogether, I have been covering the financial support that he sends to his mother, which has probably eased his burden a bit but could also be contributing to his stress. I worry that this stress will manifest in unhealthy ways. And now it seems that it is. One night, I received an unexpected call from my sister-in-law, Rachel. I was preparing dinner and couldn't answer immediately, but the phone rang insistently. I thought it was urgent. So I finally answered. "Tomorrow. I'm going on a 3-day trip with Mom. Can you take care of my son?" she said. As if I had no choice. "I'll drop him off at your house at 9 in the morning. Thanks in advance." Rachel had been living with my mother-in-law since her divorce, which was apparently caused by infidelity on her part. I always considered her selfish, but I maintained a neutral relationship for Mick's sake. However, this request was too much. I had plans to meet friends for lunch the next day, and taking care of someone else's child for 3 days was not reasonable. Besides, why wasn't she taking her son with her? I decided to decline politely. After hanging up, I felt a pang of guilt, but I reminded myself that it was the right thing to do. Not long after, my phone rang again. This time it was my mother-in-law. "What's this about you refusing to take care of Rachel's son? You know we're going on a trip, right? How could you say no to taking care of a 6-year-old? I wanted to retort with something equally hurtful, but I held back. My mother-in-law had been cold to me since the beginning of my marriage. Every time I expressed my disagreement, she retaliated. I am sure she sees me as the woman who stole her son from her. No matter how justified I was, she would always sigh and side with John or Rachel. I decided that there was no point in arguing. I told her that I would talk to John and ended the call. That night, John came home after midnight. I had waited up for him, even though I was exhausted. "Your mom and Rachel called today. They want me to take care of Rachel's son for 3 days while they are on a trip. But I have plans tomorrow. I can say no, right?" I expected John to agree with me. Even though he has been distant lately, he couldn't be that unreasonable. "Right. Just take both kids with you. I'm sure your friends won't mind." I was stunned. Seriously? Taking one child is already enough of a burden, let alone taking 2. It is completely unreasonable. It would be worse to refuse Mom and Rachel. You should respect their wishes. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Was John really that oblivious? I just didn't care anymore. Reluctantly, I messaged my friends, explaining that I would be bringing 2 children to lunch. None of them responded. They were probably already asleep, after all. It was past midnight. Finally, I messaged Rachel to tell her that I would take her son after all. Her response was infuriating. "Oh, thank you so much. To be honest, I was planning to bring him no matter what you said." The audacity. It was unbelievable. Just as I finished sending my messages, I noticed a notification on John's phone. He was in the shower. So I took a peek at the screen. The sender's name was familiar. Rachel. My ex-husband's younger sister. I remembered how friendly she and John had been at family gatherings. But I never imagined that they were still in contact. Curious and suspicious, I opened the message. Its content confirmed my worst fears. "Today was amazing. I want to see you again tomorrow." My heart sank. I had been right all along. John was having an affair. His carelessness in leaving his phone unlocked was disconcerting. A part of me felt vindicated. But the pain of seeing the evidence was overwhelming. I decided to pretend I hadn't seen anything for now. I would need more proof before confronting him. That night, I barely slept. Since discovering the affair, my nights had been restless, and my health was beginning to suffer. Despite everything, I had to keep going for Mick's sake. The next morning, Rachel arrived with her son as planned. She didn't even bother to apologize for the inconvenience. Later that day, while cleaning John's study, I stumbled upon some suspicious documents. Among them was an insurance policy for Mick, something that I myself had signed. The papers suggested that John was trying to cancel the policy without my knowledge. As I was replacing the documents, a photo slipped out from between two books. It was of John and Rachel's ex-husband's sister, taken 6 months ago. They looked happy, like a couple on vacation. I couldn't remember the last time John had taken me on a trip. The discovery filled me with a mix of anger and sadness. I decided to gather more evidence before taking any action. I was not the type of woman to suffer in silence. During the following weeks, I hired a private investigator to look further into John's affairs. What they uncovered was far worse than I had imagined. Not only had John been unfaithful, but he was also diverting money from Mick's insurance to finance his business. The investigator also found evidence of fraud and embezzlement at his workplace. It was a tangled web of deceit that involved his lover's father, a prominent businessman. The revelations were shocking, but they gave me the resolve I needed. I decided to make it public. A month later, I found myself in front of a room full of journalists, ready to expose the truth. The press conference was charged with anticipation. His lover, her father, and my mother-in-law were all present with tense and pale faces. Today it was my turn to reveal all the years of pain and betrayal that I had endured. "Thank you all for coming today." My voice trembled slightly at the beginning, but I quickly composed myself. I narrated the timeline of events and presented the evidence that I had gathered meticulously. The photographs, documents, and recordings were displayed for everyone to see. Each piece of evidence was more damning than the last. The audience of journalists was stunned. Their pens flew across their notebooks as questions began to pour in. Is it true that this company was involved in tax evasion? Did the lover's father condone these illicit activities? Did the other family members know about the affair and John's misconduct? John, his lover, and her father struggled to respond. But their attempts at denial were crushed by the undeniable evidence. At the end of the conference, their reputations were in tatters. That night, the story dominated the news. Friends and acquaintances reached out to offer me support and express their disbelief at the magnitude of the scandal. For the first time in years, I felt seen and acknowledged. The consequences were swift and severe. The lover's father's company faced investigations and a massive drop in stocks. Eventually declaring bankruptcy, my mother-in-law became the subject of neighborhood gossip, and her former friends turned their backs on her. John was fired from his job without compensation, and his reputation was irreparably damaged. His lover broke off the relationship, leaving him alone and in debt to the tune of more than $500,000. Meanwhile, I was rebuilding my life. With the help of my former boss, I secured a position in his consulting department. The work was challenging but rewarding, a stark contrast to the isolation I had felt as a stay-at-home mom. Under constant scrutiny, Mick adapted wonderfully to his new school, and his cheerful demeanor was a daily source of joy for me. On a sunny spring day, while watching him walk to school with his new backpack, I felt an overwhelming sense of pride. Despite everything, we were moving forward. Months later, the divorce was finalized. John was prohibited from contacting me or Mick. The last image I had of his son was from a school ceremony. A bittersweet memory. Rachel, stripped of her son's custody, worked in low-paying jobs to pay off her debts. John's lover disappeared from public view, and her father's company, once a symbol of wealth and power, became a warning about greed and corruption. Life for Mick and me had returned to a peaceful rhythm. Every day, I was reminded of the strength that had carried me this far. One day, as I walked to pick up Mick from school, his laughter echoed through the playground. He ran towards me with a big smile. "Mom, I had the best day ever." His happiness was my greatest reward. We had fought for our future, and it was finally here. No matter what challenges lay ahead, I knew that we would face them together. We had weathered the storm and emerged stronger.